Hello and welcome to Console Shock, episode 77, Retro and Modern Gaming Chat with Trev and Stu. How's it going, Stu?
Yeah, it's going really well, Trev, going really well.
You had a good week?
Yeah, I've discovered my PlayStation 2.
Oh, have you? What have you been doing with that? Playing games?
I've been playing games, yeah. So I've just got that out of the garage and...
Was that the big white one? Isn't there a white one you said you got?
I've got the white one, yeah, but that was being modified, and I realised whenever I played UK games on that one, it sort of cut the bottom of the screen off. So I don't know if that's my TV only doing picking up the 50 hertz signal. So anyway, I do have another one which is a fully UK one, and that one obviously plays them all sort of properly, sort of full screen. So I've actually got that one set up as well, sort of both of them. So I don't know, I'm really enjoying sort of the PlayStation 2 at the moment.
You can jailbreak
nothing to do with what's that? Sorry.
I was going to say, you can jailbreak them really easy, I think, now. You just get a memory card, I think, Freedom Boot, I think, isn't it? And you put that in and you can run any discs and any region and all that sort of stuff. Is that what you've done?
Not yet, no. I'm planning to. I found a couple of people on the internet, you can send the machine off, or I've got to do a bit more research on it, but I want to do that really just to play sort of the imports rather than, I haven't got any way to sort of copy discs or anything like that, but
no one's got not optical drives these days, so yeah.
No, exactly.
How are you going to burn anything?
So.
It's interesting because I don't. I have a PS2 Slim. That's the only one that I've got, and that's actually got a chip in it, so I can play like CDRs and everything. But I don't use it for PS2 games. I use my 60 gig PS3 for PS2 games because it's pretty much played every PS2 game I've chucked at it flawlessly. And obviously it's over HDMI. I haven't got to get any weird converters or anything. It just straight up the back of the PS3. Obviously, I'm very nervous about using this PS3. It's obviously the original fat models
that'll die anytime soon, Trev. That is, you probably got weeks left with that machine.
Every time I turn it on,
honestly, your life is in your hands.
It is. It's just on life support. I need to get a dialysis machine to plug it into. But apparently, it's the capacitors are the reason why they go now. That was the main reason. So apparently that's I know people that fix, do repairs to consoles, and one of them actually does this fix. And he's already fixed an Xbox for me, so I trust him. So if it ever does go, I'll fling it over to him. But that's kind of good to know now, because it means that, if you do pick up a fat PS3, you could probably get it to last as long as you need it to last now. Can't say the same for old 360s, and then they're screwed whatever you do. But then you can just get a Slim, can't you, for that?
Yeah, because I've got the 360 E machine.
Yeah, same here. I've got the blue
the
one.
Latest, the last one.
The very last one. Looks like an Xbox One, doesn't it? But yeah, the fat PS3, obviously, they've got that certain special thing with them because they play... I watched a really good video that Mystic put out, the PlayStation channel, and he had a really good video where just get a PS5, get a fat PS3 original, and you're covered for all 5 generations of PlayStation. Because the fat PS3 will do 1, 2, 3. The PS5 will do 4 and 5. Okay, it's not 100% perfect. It's probably about 99.
And the good thing about that, it's really easy to get a PS5 at the moment.
Exactly. You just walk in. Well, you can't walk.
You just walk into a shop if they were open.
Click and collect.
Yeah, and there you go.
Just before a robot gets it, isn't it? Robots are getting them before everybody at the moment.
Yeah,
they sort of jump in, they steal them.
There's no games for them at the moment. So
no, it's the worst launch lineup ever, isn't it? Really,
I think so. Yeah,
we moaned about the Xbox One that had Dead Rising 3.
Loads of games compared to what we've got now.
Crimson Dragon, some great games, and that was that weird Panzer Dragoon game that wasn't actual Panzer Dragoon, but basically was. Everyone's forgotten about it. It's actually quite good. Everyone hated it at the time, but it's actually quite good. Yeah.
Oh, look it
up. It's about £2 or something if you buy it now. But anyway, talking of consoles, and not Xbox One even is fairly recent. God, that's 8 years now, isn't it?
8
years.
Years,
8 years ago. Oh God, and that still feels new to me in a weird way. But it's one that definitely feels old. So old. It is older than me and you, Stu. Can you believe that?
Just about.
So we've talked about it before, actually. We had an episode not too long ago where we did like a general second generation of consoles episode, didn't we? We kind of covered the ColecoVision, the Intellivision. I think we touched upon the 5200. And of course, we talked about, the daddy, basically. Big Daddy Cool, the Atari 2600. And I think our conclusion was, at the end of the episode, is if you're going to pick a second generation console, probably the ColecoVision, the Intellivision, and even the 5200 have kind of better graphics. Might be a bit, easier on the eyes in terms of how they look. But you're probably better off with the 2600. It's got the best controller. If you don't even like the default controller, you can plug a Genesis or Mega Drive controller in. And you're completely, or an Amiga joystick or a Commodore joystick. They all work, and it's got the biggest range of games. I think nearly 600 official releases came out for it, whereas, your Coleco, your Intellivision, also they've got their fans. Hopefully not probably going to massively offend the big ColecoVision fans that will listen to our channel. But they've got libraries that barely go over 100, so the 2600 absolutely destroys them in that respect. And it's also just, there's just a lot more models. They're a lot easier to get. They're a lot easier to maintain, easy to mod. But one thing that all of those systems do have, but I think has really exploded on the 2600 is the homebrew scene. Stu, what do you know about homebrew?
Well, it's a way you sort of make your own beer, don't you?
Basically, quite literally, if we're going like yeah.
Like
that, what's that got to do with video games?
Is obviously where people make sort of the games basically at home. They get development kits, and they've got all sort of the modern technologies to, I don't know, I guess sort of flashcarts and things like that. So I guess it makes things slightly easier to make. I mean, I'm sure we're leading up to our guest here, but he will explain sort of that process a bit further. But I mean, the Atari's sort of great sort of place for homebrew games. And I have to admit that I never really had an Atari back in the day. And so for me, I've never owned an Atari now. So I'm coming in here actually looking forward to finding out a lot more about it. And the only homebrew game I know, probably the most famous one, is Halo 2600.
It probably is, yeah.
But I'm sure there's countless more. So
so on that note, you've already foreshadowed it a bit for us there, Stu. So thanks for ruining my intro.
It'll be in the title. People will know.
Yeah, but they want to get that rush of hearing me announce it, man.
Yeah.
So with on that note, we have a guest and someone that we really feel will do justice to our discussion about the 2600 generally, as well as homebrew. It's James from ZeroPage Homebrew. Hi, James. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Trev and Stu. How are you guys doing?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
Good,
Excellent.
Thank you. How are you doing?
Oh, very well. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's an
no
honor.
problem. No problem. Like we sort of said when we had a little bit of a chat before we went live, but when I got into the Atari 2600, it was fairly recently. My era, as in what I've started off with, would have been the 8-bit and the 16-bit era. So the Atari 2600 was either on its last legs or was already gone. But having discovered it in the last year, and especially like homebrew, it was every time I would look up, the name of some game that I've been recommended, a homebrew game for the 2600, your channel would always come up with video footage of it. So it'd be great just to see what this stuff is.
Oh, my SEOs are working excellently. No, I'm glad that Google is pointing people towards my channel. I mean, I've been running ZeroPage Homebrew just for 3 years. We just celebrated our 3-year anniversary of streaming online, Atari 2600 homebrews, and it has been a lot of fun. You're talking about the name the word homebrew, and you made a joke about beer, and it's kind of funny because when I post on Instagram, this happened a lot more in the early days of posting things on Instagram under ZeroPage Homebrew. I would get a lot of people that would be making beer clicking like on my
Really?
posts, and I was like, why are all these people have beer in their pictures, clicking like, and I was like, oh, it's the homebrew beer community. And they're just clicking like on anything that says homebrew, and not even looking at it. And there's another word, homebrew, that's kind of also associated with consoles and actually hacking consoles, and they use the word homebrew for cracking consoles so you can put on legitimate games without paying for them, right?
Like the homebrew scene, the homebrewers scene.
Exactly. So, like the subreddit homebrew is like half of it is like people trying to crack their consoles to play modern games. I'm like, oh, what is this? So it's quite an interesting word. But anyway, that's a side topic there. Yeah, I deal with mostly 2600 homebrew, which is is a term for, I actually wrote a little write-up about what is homebrew for some homebrew books. And the way I described it is any game made for a console outside of its console run. Like when a console is discontinued, like the Atari 2600 was discontinued in 1992. They sold their last console in stores.
That's crazy to think as well.
77 to 92. I think it has one of the longest run, if not the longest run of any console.
I think it's got the second at the moment. The record is the Sega Master System, which is still being made in Brazil.
That's right. The South Americans love the Sega Master System. There's always a new soccer game being put out, football game being put out for the Sega Master System, and Genesis So a homebrew is any game made after the console has been discontinued. That's kind of a loose term, because what if a major studio still makes one, like you said, for the Sega Master System, but Atari and Activision aren't really making any 2600 games that I know of.
Definitely not.
That's for sure. So that's kind of loosely what a homebrew is games mostly made by enthusiasts with their own tools, not sold in stores, usually sold online, or you're just given away for free. And so that's what we play on the show. We play enthusiasts games, and it's just incredible what people are coming up with nowadays and pushing the limits of what the 2600 can do. And it can do a lot, but it can also do very, very little at the same time.
Interesting conundrum.
And I was talking to you before the show about this, that the 2600, I think the 2600 and the Vectrex are the most interesting consoles in terms of how they work, because they work like no other system out there. A lot of other systems out there kind of have a screen or a frame buffer where they prepare the whole screen and then they show the whole screen. Yes. Now, what the 2600 does is it does it line by line. So it only knows what it's going to draw on the next line, essentially, in a nutshell. So for each player, there's only 8 bits. So it has to draw what the player looks like on that one line. It has 8 bits to do it. You can manipulate it, but it's essentially only has 8 bits. But when it gets to the next line, it has to load the next 8 bits to put the player on the screen. So it's constantly updating every time it draws a line, and it has to be drawing a line by line, which is limiting, but it's also incredibly flexible at the same time, because you're not limited to any height for your character. You can have a character that spans from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen, because it only knows what you're drawing on that line. So it's
insane.
It makes it very flexible for making lots of different types of looks for games.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because the Atari 2600 was essentially created just to to have games that are a missile and some kind of a ship. Or a bat and a ball, effectively, and to go from a console that's only really intended to be a bat and a ball to, we're going to talk about the specific games later on, but, things that have come out, like there's a port of Xevious being worked on, there's different iterations of Pac-Man, Donkey Kong. That is a huge jump from Pong to something like Donkey Kong, it's amazing.
Oh, it's massive. Yeah, there's, I think, 6 elements Probably more. Let me list them off. The six things it uses to draw the screen. The background, which is just a straight color on a line. Then a play field, which is like, in combat, it has those little barriers that you can't shoot through and can't pass through.
Yeah.
Then there's a ball, which is what they intended for Pong, the simple early games, just a ball bouncing around. And then there's player 1, player 2, and then they each have a missile. And that's all there is to draw on the screen. And the missiles are just 1 bit. The ball is 1 bit. The players are 8 bits. And the playfield is a very chunky 20 bits replicated on one side and then the other. So that's all the tools you have to draw on the 2600. And it's, like you said, incredible what they're doing nowadays with like games like Xevious and modern Pac-Mans.
It's amazing to me how, I sort of quoted in the introduction, Halo 2600. And now, would you sort of say things are a little bit easier to make the homebrew games because you're not limited? Because I know the cartridges, well, I haven't got a number, but they were very, very small. But now the cartridges that come out have got potentially more chips in them and bits and bobs and more storage space. So does that make the games sort of, better and sort of graphically, or is that just more storage so you can have maybe more screens, but they're all still look the same?
Well, there's a number of factors that can go into that. One of them definitely is you have more storage, which allows you to have, say, more enemies, more variety of enemies, more graphics that you can store to put on the screen. Because, those early games in, the early 70s or even in the 80s, they were 2K or 4K for quite a long time, just to mostly save money because memory was super expensive back there then. And now it's, even not like 4K doesn't even make sense to anybody's mind. It's absolutely nothing. So modern cartridges or modern binaries of games can go up to 128 kilobytes, and which is still absolutely nothing. It's about what the 2600 can read and can handle and understand. And it can still only see 4K at a time. So what it's doing internally is switching between all those 4K banks of memory, switching as it's playing the game, as it needs new graphics. But there's also, on top of that, additional chips that help the games to run. So on some of the modern homebrew games, they have actually ARM chips on the cartridges itself. So what is happening is they're doing calculations in the background while the Atari is doing its thing and preparing graphics, preparing logic for the games, which it helps speed up calculations essentially. But it still has to draw at the same speed it always does. So it can't, completely speed up the game. It still draws at 60 frames a second. And it still only has the limited graphics that I mentioned before, but the logic in behind can do a lot more. So there's a lot going on.
Would people say that's not, it's a terrible word, but that's almost sort of cheating? You're plugging in a cartridge and that's got sort of an extra processor in, or, extra bits and bobs to sort of make it go faster and things like that. And
it's definitely a sticking point, let's say, if it's brought up anytime in conversation. I tend to avoid that. I brought it up once on the show, and a furor happened. It just, so I just avoid it now and leave it for, elsewhere for people to discuss. But there is quite a controversy about that. And every time, the ARM chip is brought up for being put on cartridges, people say, oh, that's cheating. That's not true original Atari 2600 hardware. But if you look, one of the later games put out for the Atari 2600, Pitfall 2, which is, if anybody's seen it, is just miles beyond what you normally see on a 2600. The graphics are amazing. It's got 3-voice audio where the original 2600. It's the only game with 3 voice audio in the original run of games. And it's because it's using an extra chip on the cartridge. So anybody that says using an extra chip on modern homebrew is deceiving themselves, because it was already in the original lineup of games put out by one of people's favorite companies, Activision, for 2600. So it was built in. It was built into the original lineup of games. And people, even like, people say it's cheating, but then you look at NES, SNES.
That's what I was gonna. That's my next point. If you look at the NES, like Double Dragon 3, you look at the Super Nintendo, countless games, they all had additional
The launch
chips.
lineup of SNES had additional chips in it.
Really?
I believe some of the launch lineup of games, at least very shortly after they had coprocessor chips.
Yeah, Pilot Wings has a coprocessor. Mario Kart. There's a huge amount of games. Probably might be a console that you could argue has the most support chips. Percentage of the library has that. It's an interesting point, because I think, as you mentioned, Pitfall 2. I think we're sort of referring, just to get people that are listening that might not know at all. Most people would play a lot of these homebrew games unless they bought the cartridge, because you can buy physical copies. We'll probably go into that later on, but a fairly common way to do it is with a device called a Harmony cart, which is we've talked on this show before about EverDrives for other systems and flashcarts that allow you to play ROMs on real hardware. And the Harmony cart is basically an Atari version, 2600 version of that. But that does have some additional bits inside it that take advantage of, basically like having an extra chip. But I think what they use now, what is the most commonly used kind of support sort of facility that is used, is like an evolution of that Pitfall 2 chip, isn't it? I think that's what it is, like a DPC Plus, I believe it's called. Yeah.
What it came, the original one was the DPC chip that was put in, that was in Pitfall 2.
Yeah.
And then it evolved into DPC a Plus. And now what happens is there's an ARM processor, like I mentioned before, which emulates DPC and DPC Plus.
Yeah.
And that's extended even further into something called a CDFJ driver. And it's a little bit beyond my scope of what I can explain, but it allows people to make games that to interface with the ARM processor and take advantage of bank switching, which is what I was talking about with it can only see 4K at a time. So it sets it up really nicely to allow you to get the most out of the Atari 2600. And it also allows you to program the ARM chip in C, the programming language C, rather than using straight up assembly, which is what most Atari 2600 games were made back in the day, and some are now. But there's also another language, Atari Basic. So you're able to program Atari 2600 games in basic type language, which makes it very, very accessible. And I would say the majority of homebrew games for the 2600 today are made in BASIC or using C+, or the C code, using the ARM chip. Okay. There's a few people who program in straight assembly as well.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. That's what I said. So many more options now. I mean, that's just the coding in itself has many more options. It's mind blowing compared to what they would have had back in the day. And
you're touching on actually cartridges that allow you to play modern homebrew on the 2600, and there's actually 3 available options right now. There is the Harmony cart, which you talked about, which has Harmony and by extension a Harmony Encore, which has a bit more RAM. Then there's one called the Uno cart, which also has an ARM chip, but handles things differently. They both have SD cards, so you can load your games onto an SD card. Any size of SD card will do, because, like I said, games are infinitesimally small.
The ones that are in your bottom of your drawer that you haven't used for years will probably be okay.
Anything. I don't think you could find one small enough that wouldn't work.
Maybe in the 90s, but
yeah, exactly. And then there's one called the Plus cart, which is a fairly new-ish one that doesn't have an SD card. It has a Wi-Fi chip built into it.
And wow.
It's very cool. Yeah, this cart. Yeah.
Yeah, it actually connects to the internet and downloads Atari 2600 games over the internet for you to play. It's got a built-in library of 2600 games, including the original ones and homebrew, that you can just play right off the bat. You connect it up to your router, and you're good to go. And they even supply you a directory where you can put your own games into, and then it'll appear on your Plus cart. And it's just incredible.
Yeah, I actually ordered one myself because they're quite cheap. I think it's about £35 this cartridge. But yeah, you sort of sign up onto there. They've got a website. You sign up in there, and you can create your own folder structure on the website. And then with the cart in your 2600 connected to your TV, just as you said, you log in, you connect to your Wi-Fi, you log in, and then it will just sync to whatever's in that folder, so you can get homebrew games. We've already touched upon there's different carts do different things, so you might have to be careful with certain homebrew. More modern homebrew might not actually work on this cart because it doesn't support the sort of tricks that some of the Harmony cart specifically can do. But one very cool thing is you can upload high scores as well to a high score table.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It automatically, there's a number of games and they're supporting more and more. It automatically records your score, and you have a login, like you said. So they're recorded against your name and automatically put up on the high score table. And it's absolutely incredible. And right now there's only a couple games, they're unreleased, that are made for the Uno cart. So if you want 100% compatibility, you really do want to go for the Harmony cart. And the Uno cart only has a couple games, and I've played these 2 games on the show, but they're not released right now. Also, the Uno cart, because it has internet support, has a future possibility of playing over the internet a 2-player game with your friend. Over the internet.
Is insane.
My mind is blown.
Yeah.
And on the show, we played the first ever internet Atari 2600 game using actual hardware.
What game?
It was Combat.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
You literally playing the original game, the tank game.
Yeah, the pack-in game for the Atari 2600. It was only appropriate to use the first game, of course. And it fell out of sync very quickly because it's just in beta. But the first couple seconds we were all in sync and we were shooting. But it was
so cool.
It was unbelievable, and it's really fun to do the show ZeroPage Homebrew because I'm able to get these first and because I'm in constant contact with all the developers. So it's a great way for them to show off their games, is to have them streamed live online, and with they can go back to them and look at them and point to them. And it's a lot of fun being able to talk with the developers and get the inside scoop on all these games.
Yeah, I mean, so also, just to really paint the picture for people that are listening. So this isn't a thing that works by, you plug your Atari into a PC and the PC does the heavy lifting. It is all in the cartridge. So it's like Xbox Live, and we're sort of seeing kind of for the Atari 2600 all from this cartridge, which is absolutely amazing. God knows where in 5 more years where that could be. It could be hundreds of games, working over 2-player without you needing someone next to you. Because there are a lot of Atari games that are 2-player only.
There
don't have a 1-player mode.
It's really hard to program AI on a 2600.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have a lot of time and a lot of processing power to put in some clever AI, even though there's a lot of games that did. So the early ones relied a lot on human opponents.
Yeah. I mean, it's also drawing those lines on the screen. You've somehow got to shoehorn some AI code in there, while it's doing it. Yeah. People manage it, though, which is amazing. So, your channel itself, I mean, how did it get started? What's your history with the Atari 2600? I'm sure they're kind of intertwined.
Yeah, exactly. So going way back, all my friends had, Intellivision, Coleco, 2600s, and then, going on from there, NESs. But I never actually had any consoles growing up.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So maybe it's a catching up kind of thing I'm doing.
Better late than never.
Yeah, exactly. But I did have a Commodore 64 growing up, which I'm really thankful for, because it allowed me to learn a bit about programming, and rather than plugging a game into a console and turning it on, you had to work for it a little bit, and I'm constantly fascinated by the European scene, because it's mostly consoles. So I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and you have a lot of people on your show, Larry Bundy Jr. and Kim Justice, and people like that. So I watch a lot of UK.
That's the whole idea for us. Obviously, in America and Canada, where you're from, we always watched American channels and Canadian channels, and everyone talks about they had the NES, they had an Apple II, quite a lot of people had Commodore 64s. And everyone who had a Commodore 64 seemed to have a disk drive for it. Yeah. Now over here, I don't know if we were a little bit backward and we had no money, but everyone, there were. Atari 2600. I remember one friend having one, and there was a few people with Nintendos and with Master Systems, but the majority of people had sort of Spectrums, Amstrads, and Commodore 64s, and they everyone had played their games from tapes, and that was sort of the way it was sort of done, really. And so it's just obviously a sort of difference, really, but I imagine you're sort of well aware of that.
It's really fascinating that when I started learning about the UK scene and the European scene, where everybody loaded games off tape, and I'm like, why would you load them off tape? It's so slow, it's painful.
We would ask that ourselves.
I guess tapes just that was the early way of doing it, and it just caught on, and it was inexpensive to produce tapes, and it just stayed that way. It was all disk drives here. It was like, oh my god, I used tapes in the beginning, and it was like, oh, this is terrible, no thanks. But I didn't get my first console until around 1992, well after the fact, or maybe 94. I got a 2600 from a flea market for next to nothing, of course. People were just unloading them then, and a ton of games. And then I bought an NES, and now I have just about every console imaginable, actually. And like I said, it's probably a catching up kind of thing. And then getting into homebrews, I got into it fairly late. I've been asked this question before, and I can't really pinpoint the exact year that I got into homebrew. I remember being kind of aware of it probably early on with NES emulation on PCs with Nesticle. I think that was the first realization of being able to play games on your computer of consoles.
Yeah, it was amazing, mind-blowing at the time.
Yeah, and then later on, I was aware of probably an early version of playing emulating 2600 games. Like, oh yeah, very cool. But I had my own 2600, so I was like, why would I want to emulate it on PC? I can play it on my own. And probably around, I would say, 2005 or 2006 that I kind of realized that there was homebrews for the 2600, and I want to say it was Atari Age, the forum, that kind of told me about it, or it might have been even a YouTube video or something like that. And I was going to flea markets and picking things up still around that time, before all the flippers got in and started, the resellers just going in at 5 a.m. before everyone else, buying everything and then putting it on Craigslist. Then I stopped going to flea markets completely because there was nothing there. And then I just got more and more into it. Then I started going to retro gaming conventions. And then I got an idea in my head because I have a long history of broadcasting on the internet, and it started around 1999. I started broadcasting radio and doing my own radio shows over the internet. One of the earliest broadcasting because used Shoutcast. I don't know if anybody even remembers that. They made a tool that was free that you could broadcast and host your own server. So for 20 years, I had ran a radio station on the internet. It was the longest running internet-only radio station in the world that I know of. Somebody can prove me wrong, but nobody has. So it ran from 99 to 2009 when I shut it down.
What sort of station was it? Was it just music, or was there talking based? Or?
Yeah, it was talk based. So I had my own show, variety of shows over the years, and I was also I ran the station, so I invited other people to have their shows on as well. So I had time slots and like a normal radio station over the air would. And I managed when they would be on, and I would put repeats. They could upload their shows, and it would repeat the show at certain times. It was a lot of fun.
Because I always sort of think Trev's got a very good radio voice, and I said that to him a little while ago. So, Trev, you got a great voice for radio. He goes, oh yeah. My dad, he was a local radio DJ for his whole career.
Yeah,
wasn't
it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, he was on local radio. He was on Radio Caroline, a pirate radio station.
Oh, nice.
Local radio near where I grew up. So yeah, I've inherited his annoying, very masculine. I hope masculine radio voice. Well, I guess it's paying off now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you found your calling.
Yeah. So I know what that's like.
Yeah. Then I moved to video streaming in 2003, and I did a live streaming internet video show, one of the first ever on the internet. We had guests on and live bands, and we did it every week, and it was pushing the limits of what streaming. That was 3-4 years before YouTube was even a thing, in 2003. And it was 240 by 360 or something resolution. It was absolutely terrible.
Yeah,
but that's all you could do. You just didn't have the bandwidth. So I've a long history of this. So it wasn't. I just put two and two together. It's okay, I know how to broadcast things, and I love retro consoles, specifically the 2600. And I looked around and saw that literally nobody was doing Atari 2600 homebrew on YouTube or anything, any kind of show. They would feature it once in a while. Look, a homebrew, right? But nobody was dedicated to doing a show about 2600 homebrew. Admittedly,
it's underrepresented, isn't it? It's very underrepresented, the 2600 on YouTube.
It is, and it's small in comparison to modern consoles, and of course you get you go on Twitch and there's tens of thousands of people watching a Twitch stream of a newly released game, of course.
Yeah.
But I'm only interested in what I'm enthusiastic about, so I'm going to go for what I like, even though the audience is a much smaller. It's a very dedicated and enthusiastic audience. So in around 2006, I came up with the idea to do it. But then I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And I made sure I had all the proper equipment to do the highest possible quality stream that I could from the 2600. And so I modded my 2600 to be RGB out, equivalent of SCART. People in Europe would know that.
Yeah.
And so there is a mod you can do for the 2600. They come with RF originally, which is the lowest of the low output you could possibly have. It's really fuzzy and terrible resolution, and plugs into your TV, and very hard to convert actually to something that your computer can ingest.
It's what we grew up though, I think, with. So, but not practical these days. No, definitely not.
Yeah. So I wanted to get it up to as high as quality as possible, and that would be analog. In terms of analog, and then convert that analog to digital. So I installed the RGB mod into it, and then got a FrameMeister, which is one of the top quality but also most expensive analog to digital conversion pieces of equipment. It's
beautiful bit of equipment though.
Oh my goodness, and it's got so many options, and it's just gorgeous. And I've been but it's very, very expensive. So I had to, save up some money for that. And I have a bunch of, camera equipment and I know how to get things into the computer. And for my day job, I'm a filmmaker, actually. So,
cool.
So that lends itself well. So I know a bit about, making video look its best. And so it took about 2 years for me to get all that together. And I started in February 2018.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's how time has flown, really. And
oh, yeah.
You've got so much content on there.
Yeah. So we broadcast twice a week now. I think we started off once a week. And then there was too much coming out for the 2600. I had to switch to twice a week to be able to catch up to all the new content that's coming out. And then I did actually catch up.
Which is insane, yeah.
And eventually played pretty much every single 2600 homebrew game that had ever been made up to that point, barring anything that was, just a test demo kind of thing, but in actual games. And now I've added 7,800 games to my repertoire, which is really interesting as well. So I'm learning more about the 7,800.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, actually, because the 7800, I remember seeing when I was a kid growing up in the part of England that I grew up in, a seaside town. My news agent got hold of a bunch of 7800 stock, obviously the PAL version that we got.
Right.
And I thought, I had a NES at that time. And I thought, do I want to get my parents to get me that? It was super cheap. It was like £50 or so. It was obviously, this guy got a pallet of them, I guess. They're already, we're talking 1992, this would have been. But I never pulled the trigger. So I've been looking back at it, thinking, should I get one? Because I can play the 2600 games on it, of course.
Right, yeah. Got a built-in huge library already.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do have 7800s to play their 2600 games because you get the 2600 games and the 7800 games.
Yeah, so it's kind of the best situation, isn't it, really?
It is, yeah.
So I remember I used to work in, James probably don't know this, but I used to work in a video game shop. I was one of the owners there for a long while. So I'd always, if we had a 7800 in, that was always the best one to get because it played the 2600 games as well. But if, let's say I haven't got a 2600, any sort of Atari machines, so if someone wanted to get into sort of playing 2600 games, let's say, what would you suggest they get? Because there's obviously things like the Atari flashback consoles. Are they worth getting, or would you suggest actually get the original hardware, get yourself a multi-cart?
There's the Retron as well, of course, Retron 77.
Yeah, exactly. Is there? Yeah, so I was just going to mention that one. There's a number of options, and it depends how much you want to get into it, what you're really getting into it for. If you're just getting into it for like the old school games, you might want to get one of those flashbacks and you look what games it has on it and you can pick one of those up. If you want to get more variety and get into the homebrews as well, I would, and not get too serious, not want to tinker with old hardware and be able to hook it up to your new TV too. Retron 77 is a really good way to go. It's relatively inexpensive, but you have to definitely upgrade the firmware on it because the community, the Atari 2600 community, took the emulator called Stella, which is the code name for the 2600 back in the day.
Yes.
And they have made a version of the Stella emulator that runs on PCs and computers, and put it on the Retron 77. So you're able to play every homebrew on the Retron 77 now by loading it on an SD card. So it's a really good way of playing homebrew, and it has HDMI out, so it's able to hook up to modern TVs. So that's a really, really good way of doing it. But you have to update it because the original build that's on it of Stella is super ancient, and they only put that on there because it was able to, because of licensing. I can't remember exactly, but it was because of licensing. They have an ancient version of Stella. It's really, really old and not good. So
I think a lot of homebrew won't work on that earlier version as well, will it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, and yeah, it's.
I mean, how easy is it to change the firmware on there? Is it just pop an SD card in the back and away you go, or
pretty much? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to have a little bit of knowledge about computers and loading things on SD cards, and maybe formatting an SD card, because it has to be in some sort of FAT32, FAT16. So you have to have a tiny bit of knowledge, but if you've got a computer geek around you, he'll help you out. They'll help you out, right? So it's not too bad. I would say it's low barrier to entry. If you want to go authentic, there's a couple hurdles. You have to get a 2600, but you can get that on, Craigslist or eBay or wherever you want. But it comes with an RF output built onto it, which most TVs still have an antenna on it.
Yeah.
And you have to get an adapter, which is like $5 or $10. Just go to a hardware shop and you pop it on there. It's like, it looks like an RCA to, antenna screw-on type of connection.
Oh, I don't think we have those over here. Ours will just be a.
I think the power ones, you could just jack straight into the aerial.
It'll just go back into the back of the TV. So I remember in Canada, you had to screw things into the TV in the back.
Yes.
Or something. We had an old TV in this house that we lived in, and I was like, oh, hold on, what's going on here? And and I was
baffled. Different types of connections.
Yeah, I was sort of baffled, and our RF, you just pop it in the back of your TV, and obviously you've got to tune it in to whatever channel it's on and find that. But
I'm mostly going to be referencing NTSC North America terms.
No problem.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit different in PAL territory. And if you are you'll have to get the right one. Obviously, it's going to be harder to find NTSC in PAL territory and a PAL one in NTSC. So you're probably going to get the right one, unless you're buying eBay International, which is probably not what you're going to do. And so you can mod the 2600. Obviously, that's going to be very advanced. You could buy one. The most common ones are composite mods, which gives quite a bit upgraded from RF. Which is good. It's fine. The next one up that is S video, which is a lot better. It's a step up. It goes like this. The RF is everything mushed together in one cable.
With an extra layer of Vaseline smeared over the screen.
Exactly. and composite splits it out. Now there's video and audio separately. S video splits the video into two. Which is chroma and luma, so the color and the light, and then you go to RGB / SCART / component. They're all pretty much this. They're very similar, which breaks out the color into 3 different streams. So it's more separated and much better quality. So it's YBP. It's a bunch of acronyms. Let's just say it's RGB. So red, green, blue for simplicity's sake. And so that's the top quality. So you can get the Atari 2600 modded in all of those different things. And mine is the RGB mod. And I have RGB out and component out. So I've got the 2 options on mine.
It's kind of a frustration, isn't it, with the 7800, because it's of the same generation, although it was actually supposed to come out in 1984, but it's the only one that doesn't have RGB or at least composite. The NES has composite out straight off the box, straight out the bat. The Master System has RGB, in fact. So, it's the only one that's kind of lumped with RF.
Really unfortunate. For something that is so much more capable and in a totally different generation to still have RF. I've just recently modded mine before I introduced it into the stream to S video because it doesn't have an RGB mod out there yet, unfortunately. Still waiting for somebody to make one for that.
Because you could get some good graphics out of the 7800. Nice clean image.
Yeah. There's debates back and forth which is a more capable machine, the NES or the 7800. And if you put the specs side by side, some are better on one, some are better on the other. So it's a really, really capable machine. If you look at the homebrew that's coming out for the 7800, it is astounding what people are making. It is incredible. Like I played Popeye for the 7800 last night on the show, and it is incredible how good it is. I mean, it's not arcade quality because it just doesn't have the graphics, and neither does the NES. But it is really, really, really impressive what they're able to get out of a 7800. So I'm really looking forward to the homebrew scene of the 7800 because it just started ramping up last year, and
it seems to have only just started, really. Yeah, big time.
Yeah, and now there's actually just within the last couple months 2 SD-based cartridges put out, the Concerto cart and the Dragonfly cart. So now you're able to actually play homebrew easily on the 7800 in an original console, because you can load an SD card up and pop it in and play a game immediately. You don't have to wait for the cartridge to come out. And before that, it was very few people had a way to pop in homebrew into their 7800. So I think that's going to propel forward the homebrew scene quite a bit for the 7800. And we just introduced the 7800 into the Atari Homebrew Awards last year. And this year there was just tons of them.
Wow, yeah. I mean, like one good example, I mean, 7800 is something what I want to get into more, and I've only just started doing it really, but one game that I've seen, a kind of a famous one now, homebrew-wise, is Ricky and Vicky.
Oh my God.
Amazing looking platform game. I haven't seen anything on the NES that looks as good as that. I mean, there's stuff that looks really good on the NES, but it just looks, I mean, looking at it, someone might confuse that from an early Mega Drive game, it looks that good.
It does. That's probably the top of the top quality in terms of 7800 right now.
Yeah.
You can't actually play that without the cartridge because it has very, very bespoke chips in it. Actually, they developed the chips for the game. So it has special audio and video chips, I believe, in it. So you can only play that on the cartridge, and they actually made a version you can play on your computer that sells on Steam as well. I was lucky enough to get a copy on cartridge before they recently sold out of Ricky and Vicky. And the guy's really nice who made the game. He actually sent me some adapters so I can plug in Mega Drive controllers into my 7800, because the original controller for the 7800, that's all there is. There were never third-party controllers made for the 7800.
Well, there is one thing. I mean, you guys got lumped with the terrible controller, the stick, the Proline controllers. We in Powland, we got the NES style controller, which is actually really good.
Joystick on,
you can unscrew the joystick and just use a D-pad. It's not as good as a NES controller, but it is it's better than a Master System controller, which I always thought was a bit crap.
That totally slipped my mind, and I have one of those, and I haven't even shown it on the show yet. Oh my God!
They're really good controllers. They work great with 7800 games. And 2600, they connect to a 2600 as well, and an Atari ST, Amiga as well.
Yeah.
But on the 7800, obviously you got 2 buttons, and they work great. So so we got that. And you got a cool little joystick you screw in there. So we did all right for controllers on the 7800, but you guys...
shafted.
There was awful, it's like a very thin sort of stick, isn't it? Type thing.
It's smaller than your hand, so after about 5 minutes, your hand starts cramping up. The buttons are terribly placed, and it's got the nickname of the Pain Line controller. The original name is the Pro Line, because it was Atari 7800 Pro system.
Yeah.
But everybody nicknamed it's the Pain Line controller, and it is true to its nickname. It is terrible. It's terrible. I had never used it before, a couple months ago, and I held it in my hand. I was like, oh, this is not too bad. But then I actually played a game with it. No, terrible. I immediately ordered a third-party modern arcade-style joystick.
Right,
for the 7800. And there's some nice options out there, specifically from like Ed Ladden, if anybody knows of that company. They make get controllers like with arcade sticks and arcade-like buttons for the Sega Master System, the Coleco, the Atari 7800, 2600. I haven't got it yet, so I can't speak to the quality, but everybody says it's really good.
Yeah, it's like the Atari 7800. I mean, it's kind of a very quirky system. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
They're not common, but they're not uncommon either. You're fairly easy to pick up on eBay. They're not kind of like PC Engine or Turbo Graphics kind of. They're not revered in that way. No.
Yeah, they're very rare. Like hardly anybody bought them because by the time they, like you touched on that, by the time they came out, they were already 2 years past when they were supposed to come out, and they were competing with systems well above really what they at the time, right? They were,
the baseline had gone up by that point, hadn't it?
Yeah, they were supposed to come out in '84. They would have just mopped the floor with everything out.
It was as good as better than the arcades, the sort of stuff that the 7800 could do. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So
in '84,
there's only 40 original games that were ever put out, I believe. So the number of homebrews have well surpassed the original install base of games.
It's got some quirks as well. I mean, it's the sound chip. It doesn't have a dedicated one. It uses the 2600 sound.
Yeah,
which is kind of rubbish. And although cartridges can have a sound chip inside them, like the Pokey, the famous Atari Pokey sound chip,
That's right.
which sounds very much like the Sega Master System. For anybody that doesn't know, it's people put those in the cartridges, so you've got decent sound. It's kind of weird because the 5200, the predecessor to the 700, had the Pokey sound chip.
It's very bizarre. They did that, I'm sure, as a cost-cutting measure.
Yes,
because we can reduce down the cost of the console by whatever, $10, $15, whatever the wholesale cost of that is, and then put the chip into the cartridges, which is the same thing they did with the SNES. They didn't put the advanced graphics chips inside the console. They put it in the cartridge itself, which made the price of the cartridges really expensive, but the console really inexpensive, which probably works from a marketing standpoint. So only 2 games were ever put with the Pokey chip for the 7800, which is Commando and Ball Blazer, which both have really, really good sound. But now we're laden with having to put a Pokey chip in every single homebrew game that's put out, which now they're really, really expensive because we have to cannibalize Commando cartridges or Ball Blazer cartridges, actually. But now there's some alternatives being made. There's Pokey 1. There's a Hokey chip that's being made as well that he says is going to be retailing for $10, which is going to revolutionize Pokey chips being put into homebrew games. So hopefully that comes to realization. Because
I think you could probably make FPGAs, couldn't you, that sort of mimic the original. Well, it's not easy either, but
or cheap.
Hopefully someone will work it out. But it's good to see there's alternatives coming out, though. People can use them in their homebrew. Yeah.
Speaking of FPGAs, that's another fourth alternative for playing 2600 games. There is a console called the Phoenix CollectorVision Phoenix, which is a ColecoVision aftermarket console. And what they have in there is an FPGA chip that is driving it. And for people who don't know what an FPGA is it mimics, like, legitimately bit for bit actual hardware. So it's hardware emulation. It's not a software emulation. So it's actually making the hardware exactly as it was originally. And you can load onto it a 2600, Atari 2600 core into the FPGA chip. And it will be exactly a 2600 with all the quirks. So that's an other alternative. Unfortunately, the Phoenix is sold out, and it's also very expensive. So it's probably not your first choice. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think probably, obviously we touched upon, there's other consoles that can run it, like the 7800. I think in terms of the actual 2600s themselves, I mean, my personal preference would probably just be a Junior. But probably these days, what would you use as the best setup?
In terms of personal preference, I like having access to all the switches, because the Junior has the switches on the back, and they're not as
Yes.
Readily accessible. Not many games use them, but some do. Some like more advanced ones use them, like you switch it and it goes to a map system, or you switch it and things change on the screen.
I think the 7800 is the same, doesn't it? They're on the back on the 7800, aren't they? For when you use a 2600 game.
The 7800 had one of them had 6 switches and one of them had 4. But James,
2600, yeah,
2600. Sorry, and James, if you can answer this, people used to come in to my shop and they'll have 2 or 3 2600s there at some point, and they'll go, "Oh, can I have a look at them?" And of course, they'll be looking at the condition and stuff, and then they'll be looking on the back, and they'll be holding them, and they're going, "Oh, this could be a heavy one. This could be a light one," and the heavy ones were better.
Yes,
and something like the heavy 2600s or VCSs, the original one. I don't know if I'm right in saying this. They were made in California, and then when they got, they started making them in Hong Kong, Taiwan, or China, they were the light ones. So everyone wanted the heavy one.
Yeah, the heavy ones are more sought after, one, because they're more rare. They were made in Sunnyvale, California, and they just didn't make many of them before they, went to more mass production from Taiwan, I believe. They're much, much more heavy because I think they have a lot more RF shielding in them. I may be incorrect about that.
That sounds right to me, yeah.
And anything that's like first edition is more sought after. I don't personally have a heavy one. I would like to have a heavy 6er. That would be nice in the box with the chess piece.
What's the chess piece?
Well, the chess piece is on the box itself, on the outside of the original 2600s. And there's an interesting story. I'll shorten it as much as possible. Is originally when they came out, it had a chess piece on the box, and people bought the 2600s and played them, and somebody sued them because of the chess piece on the box, because they didn't have a chess game at that time. And they said it was false advertising. And so Atari had to take that chess piece off of the box. And so there are very few boxes that have that chess piece on them, because the lawsuit was very early on. So that's very, very sought after, the chess piece box. And so it only really corresponds with like the early heavy 6er Atari 2600s.
Wow, that's an interesting fact for you there, everybody.
Yeah,
Look
and
out
they did
for that chess piece box.
Yeah, so they did eventually put out a chess game, and it was quite advanced because they used a special way of putting the graphics on the screen so they could put the correct number of chess pieces across the screen. Because really, you only have two graphics, 2 players to write a whole 8 chess pieces across the board. So they had to use some tricks.
Yeah. It's funny because like we're going back to the 7800. I think one interesting thing about it is I think it can handle quite a lot of sprites, because it was kind of designed to mimic how arcade games would manage the graphics. So in that sense, the potential for the homebrew guys, a lot of a genre I'm very fond of is shmups, shooters.
Me too. Yep.
Yeah. So the potential to sort of do some really interesting conversions, like one that I would love to see is like Gradius, or something along those lines. And that
I
actually
can
makes
see somebody doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it could easily handle something. Also, the NES got a version of Gradius that was pretty good.
Yeah. I would say anything that is made on the NES can be done. I love how you pronounce it NES.
That's what we do.
NES and SNES. Yeah.
SNES, yeah.
I think anything that could be made on the NES could be converted to the 7800. There might be some limitations that I'm not aware of, but just based off the specs, I'm pretty sure that can be done. Yeah.
Okay, so that brings me to a question. Hopefully you'll find fun to answer. If there was one sort of old game that you would love to see someone attempt to do a homebrew that you think could possibly realistically be done for the 2600, what would that be?
There has been so many classic homebrew games converted to the 2600 already. It's actually unbelievable. There are 2 on my radar right now that I keep mentioning on the show because, you know, all the developers watch my show, so they listen and they.
All right, cool.
So hopefully I'm getting in their ears. The top one is Satan's Hollow. Is my number one game. I don't know if you guys know of Satan's Hollow.
I've never heard of that.
It's a 2-screen fixed shooter where you're along the bottom of the screen and shooting at these kind of green demon birds that are flying around, similar, you know, to a Galaga type situation where they dive bomb you, then they go back up to the top of the screen. And you're trying to build a bridge across on the right-hand side to the second screen by collecting pieces after you shoot these birds. And then on the second screen, you're actually fighting Satan himself, I guess. And he's flying around the screen, shooting fire at you at the bottom. Or on the second screen, he's actually throwing pitchforks. And then you go back to the first screen, and then you fight Satan, and he's breathing fire, and it's unbelievable. And there's been a proof of concept made of it for this 2600, but not a full game. That is my number one for sure. And John Champeau from Champ Games keeps threatening to do it, but we'll see. Because, you know, developers usually make the games they want to see and liked playing because there's so much effort that goes into making a game. Why would you want to make a game that you don't even want to play or you're not interested in and there's no nostalgia factor for you?
Yeah.
So
the motivation's there then, isn't it, if you really want to play it yourself?
Yeah, so that's definitely my number one. My number two is Timber, which is not a very well-known arcade game. But it's a fun kind of logging game. You chop down trees and you have to avoid things. And yeah, it's both can be done on the 2600 for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Well, hopefully there'll be we'll see someone working on those for you then.
Hopefully.
For me, I think, I already touched upon it, but I think Gradius would be great if there was a way that could be squished down into the Atari.
Not the 2600. No way.
Well, yeah,
it's
probably
be
not.
Tough.
Yeah. We need to wait to get some more chips stuffed in that Harmony cart and annoy everybody else. So that's going to be even more cheating, but we'll see.
That's right.
But that takes us to, you know, some of the homebrew games that I'd like to sort of highlight as ones that have interested me lately. I mean, one sort of quick one. Everybody who knows that, you know, Pac-Man on the 2600 was very, you know, as much as it is a playable game, and a lot of people got a lot of fun out of it at the time, it was sort of considered to contribute to the North American video game crash.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, because it was a version that was put together. You know, we know that the designer basically produced a demo, and then they were like, "Yeah, cool, let's just sell that." And it was like, "No, I've got more stuff." But it was like, "No, sorry, we're doing it," and that's how we ended up with that version of Pac-Man. But since then, people have basically, you know, created versions of Pac-Man that are so much more advanced.
Oh my God, yes.
Pac-Man 4K, Pac-Man 8K.
The 8K is unbelievable. The sound is incredible. The mazes are incredible. The developers actually even added in that very subtle cornering mechanism.
Yes,
it's not a straight 90 degrees. The Pac-Man kind of rounds the corner.
There's a slight, you can feel it. You can feel it.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable what the homebrew developers pack in, and the attention to detail too, because it's really a labor of love for making 2600 games. Nobody's getting rich off of this, and definitely if you calculate it out, their per hour salary, it's measured in cents. Not dollars, that's for sure. So
measured in love.
It's definitely really measured in love. Yeah. Even though, you know, there's stores set up, they're like Atari Age and a number of other ones that sell hundreds of homebrew on cartridges in boxes with manuals and extra little things that are packed in like little feelies and stuff. Yeah. It looks like, oh, this is a legitimate, like, huge business and like people are making tons of money, but you know, the scene is not massive. It's measured in, you know, thousands, not tens of thousands, right?
Yeah, you're not going to sell millions of copies, are you? Like a 2600 game might have done in, you know, the early 80s.
Yeah, probably the most, like I think you mentioned it earlier, the most popular, most well-known 2600 homebrew ever put out probably was Halo 2600, right? And it's a pretty good game. It's a fun game, but it pales in comparison to some of the other ones that are just don't get the notice, don't get the attention. Right, on my shelf, I've got like Galaga and Mappy. Like a game like Mappy put on the 2600 is just unbelievable. Or Robotron, that was just recently is coming out on cartridge soon. There are like 100 things on the screen at once, and the way it's done is just unbelievable. How they pack it into the 2600 by using these little tricks that have been, accumulated and picked up over the years.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great example, like Robotron or Robot War. I think 2684 was the name.
Yeah,
that's amazing. I mean, you have to check that out. Anybody listening that wants to see a really amazing example of a 2600 game that probably wouldn't have been done back in the day.
Or Zookeeper as well. That was just put out, and it won for best homebrew port at the Atari Homebrew Awards, which we host on the stream.
That was a great show. I mean, it's also I don't know how you managed to keep your energy levels up. It was pushing sort of 3 hours. What wasn't it doing that?
Yeah. Well, funny enough, our shows are about 3 hours twice a week. So I'm very used to doing very, very long shows. But you're playing a game at the same time, which is fun. And on the Homebrew Awards, we're talking with developers, and they're doing their acceptance speeches, and so there's a lot to keep me going, and it's a lot of fun, and I want to reward these homebrew developers, because they put so much effort into making these games, and that's why I started the show as well, because I thought these people are making these incredible homebrews, and I don't see anybody playing them. I don't see any kind of recognition, any kind of, people streaming them or playing them online. And I saw that there was a gap and somebody needed to do it. And so I took up the helm and,
Where do people buy these games from? You mentioned Atari Age, so that could be the answer. They all get sold through Atari Age, or do people sell them on their individual Etsy websites, or?
They do. It's obviously it's not easy to make your own cartridge from nothing. So a lot of people, the biggest one is Atari Age. They have the largest stock for 2,600 games at least. There's a number of other ones. There's Pack Rat Video Games, Good Deal Games, Repentless Video Games, 2,600 Connection. Those are all homebrew distributors. And they have, a number of games each. And some people do sell them on Etsy. Some of these that I mentioned actually have Etsy accounts. Some of them do it through eBay as well. Make it easy for people. But people that are set up like at Atari Age, you would just send them your ROM, your binary of your game, and they are able to flash it into a cartridge. They don't even need to, make a custom burned ROM chip. They have a label printer. They are set up for making boxes as well. You can custom order your own cartridge through them. I think it's $25 US. And they will send you back in the mail your own cartridge with a label. So
they probably got, I don't know, let's say 500 games on there, and they're not sitting there all on the shelf, waiting to go. They'll actually be, if I order a game, someone will then go and flash them at the game, and then, pop it in the box and, print out the label and send it out to you.
Yeah, it's pretty close to that. He does have to make manuals as well. So there is a stock situation where he does have to keep stock. And when he puts out, some of the bigger titles, he also has a certain number of boxes as well. So usually does a run of boxed versions with all the bells and whistles. And, who knows how many he orders of that. It depends on the game, I'm sure. And then after that, he offers it in just cartridge plus manual form. And he is setting up, and he's talked about eventually offering it in just ROM form, where you can buy the ROM itself. And I'm not sure on the setup on how he's going to do that yet because of, the threat of piracy.
I'm sure lots of people, they'll make the homebrew games and they'll just release them themselves on their own website as, download this, have fun, let me know what you think.
Yes.
I'm sure people must do that as well. And then
most of them I find do just release them for free. Because you're not really going to make a ton of money anyway. So I think when you put it into a box and put it into a cartridge, it's more about the nostalgia of it. It's more about having your game in a box on cartridge. And I can completely understand that because, as a filmmaker, my latest film was, put on Blu-ray, and it's like, well, that's a dying thing, having a physical copy of it. Everything's streaming, everything's downloadable. And, we're in this scene, like you guys and myself as well. We have cartridges on shelves and boxes of games and original consoles. Why do we do that? Because there's an attachment to physical objects. We could emulate every single one of these games for sure, up to a certain
it's not the same though, is it?
No, it's not the same as hearing that click of the cartridge go into the hardware that's now 44 years old for the Atari 2600, and it's still working when you turn it on, and it's going through modern televisions. It's this feeling that you get that you can't replicate with a ROM. So I can see why there's still a market for putting things on cartridge, because we're all, I don't know about the psychology behind it, and I don't want to get into it, but yearning for being younger and the nostalgia of it all.
James, what's your thoughts on, because obviously there was a long crowdfunding campaign for this new Atari console, and I think it came out just before Christmas, same time as the PS5, the Xbox Series X. Nintendo's absolutely flying, and of course all these new graphics cards are coming out. So I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that this new Atari console has not done amazingly well from what I've heard. But what's your thoughts on it? And would that be actually a good way to play the old games? Because I know it comes bundled with a few of them, and I don't know, can you put the old games on there as well?
Well, I'm pretty sure it's, I don't know a lot about the environment, but I'm pretty sure it's a lockdown environment.
Right.
To an extent, I know you can load Windows on it if you want, but why would you do that?
Yeah.
They have a store for old Atari games on it that I know of, and you can play certain licensed games. I think they're really sticking to Atari games. There's no Activision games as far as I know on there, which is really what everybody thinks of when they think of Atari games.
Pitfall.
They think of Pitfall and all the other amazing Activision titles. The Atari VCS, which it kind of pisses me off they use that name, because that's a name of an existing product.
Yeah.
And they actually named their other consoles the 400 and the 800, which is ridiculous as well. Those are actual consoles as well. It's a product that's looking for an audience. I don't understand who it's meant for. Really, it's quite expensive for what it does, and it's not up to the level of like an Xbox or a PlayStation, and it's almost the same price.
Yeah, I mean, you can get like the Atari flashback collections on like the Xbox and the Switch. And...
Oh, yeah, for cheaper,
Yeah.
You can get them on your PC. There's, I think, only a handful of games that are exclusive to the Atari box, which is the name that everybody calls it, rather than the VCS, because that's confusing. So I don't know what the draw would be. The only thing I really like about it is the aesthetics of it. It's quite nice looking.
I actually think it looks wonderful.
Yeah.
And to continue your sort of point there, to me it felt like, well, okay, you can sort of play games on it, and you can play some of the old ones. We can do that on the PC.
Yeah.
They'll release new games, but it's not that powerful.
You can get the Flashback X, can't you? The latest Flashback console, and that has 7,800 games as well as 2,600. So
exactly. So you look at who is going to buy this. Are kids going to buy it? No, they know nothing about the Atari. They have no nostalgia factor for it. It's the same price as a PS5 or close to it. So they're obviously not going to ask for it. It's not going to be kids. So your market is nostalgia. Anybody who knows what Atari is, it's going to be late 30s, maybe mostly mid 40s to and upward.
Yeah.
And are they going to buy that? If they're okay, we have to divide that into gamers and non-gamers. They're going to look at the price, and then they're going to compare it to like a flashback, which is a tenth of the price.
Yeah,
and you can get Activision games on a flashback too.
Yeah, still and HDMI, has all the bells and whistles. Yeah,
has HDMI, has controllers, has everything you need. So if they're comparing it, it's like, oh, I can play my old games on it. Well, I'm going to go for a tenth of the price. And if you're looking at somebody who's like really into gaming, they're going to have a bit of knowledge about the alternatives that are out there, and they probably have old consoles that they can buy these mega packs of games for at the used game store for $10. You can buy a stack of them. You can buy all of them for the same price and put them on your PS3, PS4. They release them every year. The same company, Atari, the new Atari, is puts these out every year on every console. And I've got stacks of them in my closet.
Yeah, I mean, Stu, you were talking about the PS2 earlier. I mean, that's great for compilations. There's an Activision anthology compilation, which has got River Raid and Kaboom and all the classics all in one place. And it plays 80s music in the background when you're playing them. It's really cool. Yeah, wow. And it's on the PSP as well, so you can get a portable version. And you've got like Atari anthology and classics. So you get the £20 PS2.
Yes.
Still pretty compatible with modern TVs. Get those discs off eBay for those games for like £3 or £4 each.
Oh yeah,
you've got everything you need. Yeah,
yeah. I've got that big PS3 that you guys were talking about before the show as well, and it plays PS1 to PS3, and you get all those collections. You're set.
Yeah,
you got everything. That's
exactly,
and that's what I do play arcade games on. Like when Zookeeper came out for the 2600, I was like, I've never played this in the arcade. I've never even seen it in the arcade, but it's on one of those compilations, those arcade compilations, and it's super, super cheap to get.
Yeah. And if you wanted to like play, some of the games that perhaps were on the 2600, but they're from an arcade game, there's Pac-Man, collections and Namco Museum.
Yes.
Online.
Those are great.
They're great. Sometimes there was a disc copy I recently got for the Xbox 360 Namco Virtual Arcade that has like 30 classic Namco games. You can play people online. Probably you could do that with the Atari the new VCS. I think
maybe. I'm sure.
Yeah,
they thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's all set up on the PS3 and
yeah, so I don't see a person that I could ever recommend it to. I don't see the niche. Even if there is a niche, it's super, super small. I don't see it really catering to anyone. I'm more excited about the Amico for the Intellivision.
Tommy Tallarico's thing. Yeah,
he used to have a TV show in Vancouver, Canada, actually.
Wow.
Way back in the day. So I know him from, not personally, but I know of him from way back when, because they used to play, old games on and have a TV show about it. But I'm waiting.
Famous for his video game music, of course. Jim and
I've gone to see those too as well. They're really, really good. His live video games live.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Live.
Yeah,
really good. He's a talented musician.
Yeah.
But I'm waiting to hear what the definitive thing is about physical media on it, because I'm a big proponent of actually owning the software that I have, the games that I have. I'm not really into downloading and virtually owning things, because as soon as they turn off the servers, which they always do, you are done. You can never download it again, even if you paid for it. Like, oh, my hard drive crashed. Well, there's all your games gone because the servers
Valve ever go bust. That's your hundreds of Steam games gone. Yeah, potentially.
Exactly. So I think I'm done with modern consoles, because the new PS5, there's editions that don't have discs. So I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to do that route where I am buying a game and I don't have a disc for it, I'm just going to go for a computer game. It's more powerful for the video card, more storage. I can do whatever I want and, have VR headsets and go all in. But in terms of consoles, they're done. They're not as powerful as PCs. I don't see any point. They are PCs. You look at the new ones; they're huge.
Yeah,
they're
you just
massive.
locked into the PS store, or you locked into the Xbox store. Basically, you choose which you want to be locked into. I mean, we've had this discussion a lot on the channel because I like consoles, but PC gaming is where I mainly go. It's not just the fact that all the modern games tend to be the best version. I mean, there'll be a bit of a drop off right now, because the PS5 and the Xbox are very, very powerful, but it'll catch up and it'll overtake them within a couple of years. So you have all the best, version of the current gen games. You can play the last gen still fairly easily. And even way you'll struggle with some going back to like Windows 98 and Windows 95, but you better play a huge backlog and then get RetroArch going, get your ROMs into RetroArch. You can have every console that ever came out on one device with a PC and new stuff. It's like difficult to argue against.
Exactly. Thinking of that, there's another way to play Atari 2600 games as well. You can have a Raspberry Pi little console plug in a USB controller. That's probably one of the cheapest ones, but huge barrier to entry unless somebody sets it up for you. Because it's getting easier, but it's not super easy for non-computer illiterate people who just want to play games, right? Plug and play. But that's a really good way of doing it too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just mention RetroArch. I would say that setting it up on a Raspberry Pi is a lot harder than RetroArch. And RetroArch isn't plug and play either on the PC. You have to do a lot of configuring. It's all GUI based. You can do it, and there's guides, but you don't just download it. Bang, there you go. Oh my god, I've got 1,000 games. You have to work it out.
There's no store. There's no easy way to access things, because that would be very, very bad for them to set up a store with a bunch of ROMs that they don't own. But you have to do a bit of work to do it that way. But it's very portable. Like I have a Raspberry Pi enclosure, and you can bring it to friend's house, and you have 2 controllers and a tiny little box, and you can hook it up to any TV through HDMI. It's a really great way of doing it, and you can have 2600 games on there, 7800, NES, anything.
Well, it sounds like then, with all those options, get a fat PS3, get Activision Anthology on PS2, get Atari Anthology, done. You're all finished.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So, I'm conscious we've hit nearly an hour and a half, guys. You must be... James, are you sick of talking about 2600 now? Or?
Never. I've got a huge list of notes in front of me that I haven't even touched. It's unbelievable.
Oh my god, we've got to put this in 2 parts then, I guess, and get you back
maybe
on.
I could just rattle through the things. Like, they're mostly about the show and what we've done. Like, we've had, like I said
please
before,
go ahead.
The Atari Homebrew Awards we do every year, which we celebrate the best games that come out in the year, and we just had that, so people can go see that on YouTube. We do live remote streaming from retro gaming expos, specifically Portland Retro Gaming. We did a 12-hour Stella fundraiser, the Stellathon, which is the emulator for the 2600. We raised like $3,000 for development into...
So you weren't drinking beer while you were playing the...
No, not for 12 hours. Oh my god.
Not for 12 hours. Drinking beer and playing Pac-Man for 12 hours.
That would be cut short really quick. I think it'd be over in about a couple hours if I was doing
dangerous.
That. We do developer spotlights where we have the developer on live. And we run through all of their games that they've ever made, and they talk about them, and we play them while they're on the stream. And almost every episode, we have an exclusive debut or an update of a 2600 or 7800 game, because we have, direct line to all these developers, and I talk with them daily, really. And I monitor all the new releases and make lists of the newest version of the 2600 or 7800 games. It's all in the Atari Age forum, because I use these lists at the end of the year to do the Atari Homebrew Awards, which we include 2600, 7800, 5200, 8-bit games. And also this next year, we're introducing a new category for the Atari Lynx, which is the
wicked. Love the
handheld, because there's a fairly big homebrew community for the Lynx, and so
the amount of power that they've got untapped in that thing, which never got realized. It destroyed the Game Boy and the Game Gear, didn't it, specs wise?
Oh yeah, and it's so frustrating that Atari didn't do better with all of its consoles, and because there's so much potential in them. But now we can enjoy them in the homebrew scene, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And also we have a special stream coming up pretty soon. That's probably going to be one of the biggest things ever to happen to Atari 2600 homebrew. It will just blow everybody's mind.
Oh my god.
Unfortunately, I can't give any details about it because I'm literally under. I know, and I say it almost at the end of every episode too. But I'm literally under a non-disclosure agreement about this thing.
I bet it's going to be Call of Duty on the Atari 2600.
I know what this is. I know what this is, James.
Do you?
You're holding out on this. It's Gradius for the 2600.
Oh, I wish.
You shot it down earlier. You shot it down. And that's it.
Well, I'm trying to throw you off the track, really.
That's it.
Throw you off the scent of what it actually is. No, it's huge. It's such a big announcement that people never see it coming. It's unbelievable.
So when is that coming? That announcement?
I don't know yet. It could be a couple weeks. It could be a month. It's in that kind of time frame because I haven't gotten the word yet, the word go yet for it. But it's huge.
Okay.
It's huge, and everybody that has anything to do with even not just homebrew but 2600 will be interested in this. So this will make gaming news headlines.
Wow, we have to check this out.
Even some of the biggest like anything to do with gaming, pretty much this will probably be headlines. Yeah.
So you're going to be this will be on your channel. You're going to sort of make a video and cool.
Yeah,
cool.
It'll be live. We do all our shows live.
Wow.
So this will happen live. I can't even say what it's even related to, but I can't wait anyway, to say the least. Let's say that.
Well, that'd be cool because the time differences. We'll probably be in bed and we'll wake up and bang, there it'll be.
Yeah, I may do a special. Like I used to do noon shows, which worked in Europe because there's a lot of developers for the 2600 in Europe, and I like them to be able to watch it live. But because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to have any of my normal guests over for a year, all my friends. So I've been doing the show with my wife Tanya for the past year because that's the only person I've been able to have over.
Was she always big into games, or have you got her into it with all the homebrew that you're doing? Or
she's always been into games, which is great. So I didn't have to convince her or anything. She was all on board.
Wow.
And she's always been very supportive of the show, and she was on the show before the pandemic too. So she just kind of went from once every 2 weeks to twice a week. So she filled in a lot of gaps. Yeah, and
that's cool.
She's really loving it, and she obviously knows all the newest games now because before she was only seeing 1/4 of them. But, so it's a lot of fun. So she'll be there too, I hope. But I'll make sure it's probably at noon so that you guys can catch it live.
That'll be amazing. Yeah, we'll tune in for that. So definitely subscribe to James's channel. I mean, is there anywhere else that we can catch you on the interwebs?
I try to cover a bunch of places. The live shows are on Twitch, they're all ZeroPage Homebrew. ZeroPage one word, Homebrew another. So Twitch under ZeroPage Homebrew, you can catch the recordings on YouTube under ZeroPage Homebrew. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And mostly I post most things on Facebook and the bigger things on Instagram and Twitter. But you can catch me and the Atari Age forum. So AtariAge.com is where I post a ton of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, just before we do sign off, then I need to you need to subliminally hint in your next stream.
Yes.
Gradius for the 7800. Just drop a hint. Just keep saying, "Oh, wouldn't Gradius be good on this console?" And someone will pick it up and be like, "Right, I'm going to do it."
Would you settle for 7800? I think you'd get a much better version on the 7800.
Yeah, I think I'll go for 7800. And if they could sneak a little bit of Castlevania in the 7800.
Oh, have you seen the Intellivision version of Castlevania?
Oh, that's amazing. Intellivision.
I've ordered that. I've ordered that one already. It looks so incredible.
It's even like the music's in there and like
everything.
I don't understand it. I'm scared. I'm actually scared.
Yeah. I don't know how they even pack that in. The homebrew developers are just unbelievable what they can do.
Yeah, they squished it in there. I mean, it gives me hope for a version on some kind of Atari device, like old school Atari device.
For sure.
Again, you can put the word out, discreetly, and then we'll get that as well.
Okay, Castlevania and Gradius, for sure.
Castlevania and Gradius, that would be amazing. Maybe on the links, that would be good as well.
Oh, yeah, portable.
Yeah, portable version. Cool. Right, so check James out on all of his various channels. ZeroPage Homebrew, just give that a search in your Google machine and you'll be able to see all the different places where he lives on the interwebs. Stay tuned for that huge announcement that's coming up. We're all going to be crossing our fingers. Come on, Gradius. I'm hoping it'll be something. You're really excited for James to announce whatever it is. So keep your eyes peeled. Stu, where can you find us on the interwebs?
Okay, so you can find us on Facebook under Console Shock. You can find us on YouTube, Console Shock. If you search that, you can find us on Twitter, Console Shock UK, I think it is on there. And also any sort of podcast client. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you want, anywhere you download your podcast from. We're on there. Again, search Console Shock and you'll find us.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much, Trev and Stu.
Thank you very much, James. That's brilliant. That's really good.
Really appreciate you coming on, James.
No
we'll check out his channel, ZeroPage Homebrew. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.